I'm just trying to get a little inspiration so we can get down the shop and get some work done today. Nice camel job. Always looking for ideas on camel jobs. By the way, B25 Mitchell would make an excellent semi-scale plane. One of the things I've always tinkered and toyed with the idea of making one. Like a ballerina with the big rudders. But we are Spitfire bound, and we are ready to get down the shop and get some work done today. Unusual paint scheme with the invasion stripes up on the nose. Polish flag. More ideas. No matter what, you never have too many books or too much inspiration. Now, in today's mail, I got a nice thing from my good friend, haven't heard from him in a while, Ed Gallagher. And what this is one of the finishing techniques he's been using in RC. He sent back a spare part. In fact, he sent this part. I guess this is just an extra part. He's been dyeing a silk span, and of course, dyed it red here. The object of dyeing it red, I assume, is so when you sand through, you can see the spots coming through. Now, just looking at this, in fact, let me get a piece of sandpaper. I want to see how this sands out myself. See, the object of doing this is you can see the high spot come right up. And if you have the edges radiused off, now what Ed has is the dope is tinted. This, of course, is the raw covering. This is the clear, and he's tinted it with some light blue here, just so the same effect that when you go to sand through, you can see, as soon as you see the red coming through, you know you've sanded through. I'm reading right off of Ed's note. He says, the hot spots, meaning the red, show up long before you sand through. Well, I'll tell you one thing, this definitely does work. I don't know how much dope he's got on here, but I've been trying. Let me try one more thing as long as we have a test piece. And of course, this is, hey, Ken Thompson did the same thing with a test piece. See, now if you were doing a quarter scale RC ship, a real big ship, this would really be handy, but needless to say, most of those are monocoat or some other kind of finishing system. Anyway, that does seem to sand out. I don't know if you can see that. It does seem to sand out real nice. And this, by the way, just to add something to what Ed is saying, this is a good idea. If you have a crashed plane, a spare plane, make yourself a little test of the finishing system that you want to use. This is Rip Dye on silk span, dyed clear. You can see it must have been humid the day that he sprayed this on, and sanding it out. And actually, this is actually one way of sanding it out that for sure would help if you were going to try to sand. In fact, a spot like this, if you were going to try to sand it, especially in an I-beam, which we're going to be doing a lot of in the near future. And the red, Ed's exact words are hot spots. That's an excellent idea. Needless to say, you have to bury it in colored paint, but who cares? It doesn't take long to buff right down, flatten right down. Good tip from Ed Gallagher. This is a t-shirt, needless to say, from Rory Tennyson. Nice shirt. He knows I collect shirts. This is what I'm going to do to Banjack this year. Bite that Mustang up. Anyway, from Rory. Now Rory's got a lot of cool stuff. He's been watching a lot of videos. And this is one thing. I'm always looking for paint job ideas. Rory rides Harleys. He sent me a bunch of magazines to check out. But if you look at these, not only are there some scantily clad, well, hey, there's Windy down there. Look at this, he fell off his bike. But paint job ideas, truck magazines, any of these magazines, they tend to really have some nice paint jobs in them. You go through them, look, just to name one. And maybe not totally appropriate for a stunt ship, but on a Harley. Hey, I know Midgely likes this stuff. What am I talking about? I like it. Anyway, it's just another good idea, and this is the whole thing I love about the hobby. Sharing ideas. It's just having the ideas. If you want to copy paint jobs, colors, schemes, when the Jimmy Casal did a flame job, always having those ideas is so important. And whenever you're looking for custom ideas, magazines, a good source of ideas. Again, these RC magazines. Now this is Unlimited Scale Racing Association, and there's some really nice pictures in this article of the little like Reno type air racers here, and if nothing else, the paint jobs are all exciting, all nicely painted. One I particularly like. Talk about a wild paint job. Midgely, I want to see you do that one. Sometimes you're just sitting around and you just want to relax and enjoy looking at magazines, but magazines also serve as an excellent source, just an excellent source of ideas, even inspiration for a model that you might not even be considering building. Again, just always good ideas. Now here's an unusual magazine I've never seen a copy of, but it's loaded up with cool stuff. Aircraft maintenance technology. Obviously they're using an Allison engine in this. This looks like a race car. I don't know. Maybe it's an airplane. I don't even know it. I'll have to check this out when it comes to break time. Anyway, Rory, thanks for everything. Can't thank you enough, but we got to get to work. I've shown this little magazine rack many times, but and again, it's not a big deal, but just to give you an idea, and believe me, you never have too many magazines. You never have too many books. And this is always a good idea too. I made this years ago. Really convenient for those times when nature calls. Anyway, this is something, hey, anytime I can add to my collection, I love to do it, and I love to share them with everybody. Now in today's mail, I got these pictures from Kent Tyser, and I really hope he's going to be building another one. This is a Strager wing. He's taken a couple of shots to show me the progress on it. I really appreciate this. Of course, there's the typical Strager fuselage. He's put the belly scoop on, which is appropriate for most P-51s. Banjack, if you're looking, we can have a special P-51 contest using most of the Strager construction here, it looks like. Foam tail, and filler. Now, this is the second one of these wings he's built. The first one came out perfect, so I see no reason why this one wouldn't be perfect. Nice, neat working area. How does a classic look? Banjack? Tell me you don't like that. Come on, that is classic. We'll have a great year this year with all the semi-scale planes, I'm sure. Now, while I've been shooting this video, I've also been shooting up a special video really dedicated to all the little idiosyncrasies of buffing out a plane. It's the time of year most people are buffing out a plane, so it should be real helpful to quite a few people. But we've made some progress here. It really looks like it's going to be a pretty ship when it's done. Really looking forward to seeing this guy totally assembled and ready to fly, and it's coming. This is kind of nice. You can see the reflection of the checkerboard right in the finish. This paint, because we've waited long enough, and it's really been probably more than 6 or 8 weeks, it really has buffed up beautifully. It's absolutely beautiful how this is coming out. I'm humble, I know it. Alright, more on this later. I just got a really sad letter in the mail. Somebody has I don't know what the right word is even, made up some not offset pads, motor mount pads, using some aluminum that they found. I guess found is the best word. I wouldn't say they stole a stop sign. Hey, I'll leave it to your imagination. But I want to explain something. This is really a significant thing. When you make up any kind of pads, and I have to make up a whole bunch now as samples for one of my new friends that's basically going to distribute these in Europe, what you need to have is an accurate template. You can see I have each one marked for the motors that I have available, OS, Max, Fox, whatever. Bob Martens has sent me some of these, and these are templates that I use to hand drill these out. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of grades of aluminum, just like there's a lot of grades of wire. You don't want to use a soft aluminum. You want to use a hard aluminum. 2024 T6 or 6061 would be the first choice. If possible, you'd like to have it anodized so it has a hard shell on it. And it's pretty much forever. Even if you crash the plane, you can use them over. But when you have to, in the worst of all worlds, if you're really sending your kids to college and your wife's out of work or whatever, call me and I'll send you the aluminum for free. Promise, for free. Can't beat that price. But the whole point is, you don't want to jeopardize the whole plane, just like you don't want to jeopardize a whole airplane by putting in a bogus control system. You don't want to jeopardize, it's the heart and soul of the plane. The pads on the motor mounts are one of the most significant things of the whole construction of the plane to get a good, decent motor run. See, these templates are made relatively accurately for each motor that I have them in stock, and if I don't, I need you to either do one of two things: make me an exact tracing of that motor mount lug, and you can rub a piece of paper with a pencil, or else send me the motor, of course. That's the other choice. But you need to have this accurate. That's number one. Now, what this does, if you don't have this on here, this is resting on two little points, and as time goes by, the hardwood tends to sink in, depending on which bolt you tighten first, or if you don't torque them down equally. And a lot of people tighten one bolt at a time, which is wrong. You should go around like you're torquing side to side, corner to corner. But one of the things you want to keep in mind is what this does. It doubles the surface area, so it tends to keep the alignment of the plane. And even a couple of thousandths of an inch in one corner, that whole crutch can distort, twist, spinner won't line up, and it happens as time goes by. This ensures a couple of things. It minimizes the vibration. It gives you 2 or 3 times the amount of footprint, and it's an excellent idea no matter what motor you're using. I'm sure even the tune pipe guys have figured out that this is the way to go. And I've tried to use thinner aluminum. I've used 16th and 3/32. 1/8 is definitely the best. Definitely will not distort in time or give you a problem. And it's really most important in an engine that vibrates. A Tiger 60 is a high vibration engine, very high torque engine. Same thing with a Fox 35. Higher RPM engines, it seems less significant, but it's still good insurance. Without that motor run, without a solid motor run, for the cost of 2 pads, you're kind of guaranteeing that you're going to have a good motor run. I've also found one of the things that really work well, the bolts. I get these from Micro Fasteners. I always like to use 6/32 bolts. Always. On any kind of a full built-up ship. These have a lot more surface area, seem to work real well. They also have more thread area in here. And again, another point is when you have this kind of a system, you don't have to over-tighten the bolts. When those bolts start sinking into the motor mount wood, you be tightening them every 3 or 4 times you fly. The reason for a 632 bolt is you have 6 times the area of thread touching thread as a 440. Remember that number, it's quite significant. There's much more area, you get a much better bite, no matter what motor. Even a Fox 35, I would say, consider using 6/32 bolts. Also, these pads, and I make them up, of course, for any motor. Let me take one of these out. These are the little tips I think a lot of people somehow, nobody bothers to tell them about it. They build a whole plane here. There's the little countersink screws. Let the countersink screws sit right in there. We have a nice package deal. And of course you can get these blank or drilled out for any motor that I stock. And every time I get a motor from another customer, I make a template so that we have an ongoing set of choices here. And I would suggest no matter what plane you're building, this is a good choice. This is a very inexpensive investment, but you will be very happy with the plane 10 years later. Very cheap insurance. Like I said, if you want to, I sell so many of these that I do them 5,000 at a time, I think. Anyway, they're real anodized. They all have the hole drilled already for the little screw. But now what you need to do is no matter what motor you make, no matter what you do, here's one for a Max 35. You want to take this part, you want to assume you have your template for a special motor, or you buy them undrilled. You want to line this up real accurately with the edge. And you want to clamp this with a vice grip plier on one end, and then drill this hole and this hole, and try to use this as a drill guide. Use exactly the same size drill. This is one of the easiest ways, low budget way to do it if you don't have a milling machine. Obviously, if you have a milling machine, you don't want to have chips underneath. You want to have a really sharp drill. Anybody doesn't know, maybe I've never put this on. When I started working in a machine shop, I used to grab a drill press and just go, well, it's a much better way to do it, it's called clearing a chip. Go in a little bit, let the piece come up. Don't go all the way through in one stroke of the pen. Clear the chip all the time. Clearing a chip will save you wear and tear on the drill. Now you can pop this. These will have to be countersunk to make them at least machine shop quality. Another thing you'll notice, if you try to use real soft aluminum, the problem with real soft aluminum is you can't drill it. It doesn't drill nicely. It doesn't drill crisp and clean. When you're using one of the good alloys of aluminum, 2024 or 6061, obviously the aluminum is expensive. It's aircraft grade aluminum. But one of the things it drills in machines beautifully. And for the amount of time you put into one of these airplanes, well, it's just crazy not to take the little extra steps. Again, clearing a chip, always a good idea, especially with aluminum. The drill flutes don't fill up with chips. Now this is something I've done before, but I'm trying a little bit of a different technique here. This is for a customer who's building a Brodak Nobler, and he wants a molded turtle deck, but he wants it out of not a laminated part, out of 3/32 wood. We've been making these out of laminated wood. So what I figured I'd do is I'd do a test piece, run this off with some nice A-grain wood, which we just happen to have a nice piece of, because we've done this on tape enough times. It's almost getting redundantly boring, but one of the things this will allow us to do is to see if we can generate a really nice piece. This is the Spitfire turtle deck mold, and of course we know that probably a part of this fits just about every plane from an SV11 to who knows what. Anything that has this kind of a turtle deck. And I'm going to try to come up with, this is going to be the first time I tried to do this with one thin piece of wood. Now if this doesn't come out strong enough, what I'll do is I'll use this for a base and laminate another piece on top of it, but I'm hoping this is going to be strong enough. So on a Spitfire it really wouldn't be that strong, because you're using the whole thing, but on a Nobler you're only using the back part of this. And this might be something we can offer as an accessory if this works out well. An accessory like the molded cowling, we can make up molded turtle decks for John Brodak to sell or to distribute or whatever. The only part of this that makes this difficult is getting the A-grain wood that's really nice straight grain. If you had the wood, the rest of it is kind of easy. So anyway, I'm going to put this aside to dry till tomorrow, and we'll take out the Nobler plans and see if this is going to be a doable thing tomorrow. This is the latest project. We're not going to spend too much time here, but this is an old Stewart stove. We want to polish this up, and this is what we want to use to make the island in our kitchen with. Anybody that's as old as me, you probably remember having one of these. Nice knob, say. And Karen's already been out here. We got it all ripped apart, got all the burners out, and having fun working on this. But this is a real antique. This is not a, not a rubber Mustang or something. This is the real McCoy. More on this later. Let me tell you, if you ever want to see some good paint, Rust-Oleum appliance paint. Boy, does this go on nice. Too bad we can't use this. Maybe we can use this to paint a plane in the future. How old do you think this stove is, Cap? 100 years old? Like working on an old steam engine. Good trick for any furniture refinisher that's doing this kind of old stuff. Old pieces of baked on, I guess this is some kind of porcelain or something, is just wipe them with acetone before you paint them and let it dry. You better believe this is a labor of love. This is for Karen, too. I don't put this much work into an aeroplane. Holy man. Could be restoring a steam engine here. Another neat little trick. If you have rolls of Charmin or Bounty or whatever, the plastic doesn't let the paint stick, so they're nice for holding things up while you're painting. When a 100-year-old piece of iron comes back to life, it's really rewarding. This is the plate. It took me 2 cans of WD-40 to get this off. It's a Stewart. And I want to really carefully get all of the grit off. We've used about 4 boxes of Brillo already to get this off, but I don't want to refinish this. This I want to leave completely original. You can see how thick the grease is on there and everything. And I'm down to having the main part ready to strip down. May even get it done tonight. And then I want to take all the brass, all the steel, clean it up, You've never done a job like this. Don't start now. It's a lot of work. But boy, when you're done, you really feel like you've really rescued something. Like working on an old Allison engine or a Spitfire. By the way, I have a video coming. I want to warn Banjock about this. Brian McCarthy's sending me a video of all of the Allison engines that were available in England after World War II, and they turned them into hydroplane engines. And he's got a really neat video on that. Anybody's interested, I'll send Banjock a copy. I know he's interested. Anyway, it's coming, baby. Stewart. Remember Stewart's root beer? The problem we've really run into here that's really terrible is there's just so many bolts that are frozen and rotted in. Even WD-40 won't get them out. Just another day of refinishing furniture with Andy and Karen. Needless to say, this is going to dry overnight. By the way, this Rust-Oleum, the reason I'm saying this Rust-Oleum, I'll bet you could use this on, like profiles and stuff. It really has a nice gloss. And definitely one coat looks like it's going to cover this. Anyway, one day. Yesterday or the day before, we put this shell together. This is nice 3/32 A grain. And the only place there's a split is at the very back, and we know the technique for gluing that together is real easy. You take a little pie slice out of the middle and just squeeze it together. So I would guess that for our first one that we've done with this thickness of wood, this is going on a Nobler anyway. We're only going to use the back half of it, but this looks like it's going to be real successful, and this looks like one of the things we can put in the bank for the future. I wasn't sure how this, even this joint, because this really is thin. When you get down to 3/32 wood, you really tend to get a little bit flimsy, and you really better have a perfectly straight piece of A-grain. That really looked like it worked out nice. Today, we finally entered the computer age. We don't know how to work it yet. My wife is going to give me lessons. My brother-in-law is going to come over, but basically we have a computer. Anyway, I'll tell you one person that really loves it is the fish. Boy, they sit here watching that computer screen go by all day long. Anyway, I assume within a week or two we're going to know enough how to work this that we'll be able to communicate rationally with the world outside. And that's been the case all through this whole project. Everything goes on the back burner here while several other house projects. Sometimes I wonder how many things a man can do in his life here. This is all going on hold. We have other projects to work on, but this is something I guess every modeler runs into, and knowing that it happens to everybody will help you get through the tough times. Billy Word used to say, and I think it's a good saying, that if life didn't get in the way, life is what happens in between model planes. Well, it really isn't for me. Again, a frustrating day. I'm sitting here, I want to get started on this, but there's just too many things to do. And I guess that's a real valid part of any modeling project, is not to get frustrated when pipes break and computers come of age and everything else that seems to be getting in my way here. House projects, working on stoves. I'm just glad that I've gotten this far this long. But it happens. And there's not much you can do about it. Assuming you have a life, there's not much you can do about it. There's a little photo from Michael Ames. He was here visiting us a week or two ago anyway. And he sent a nice picture. Now, one of the things Michael Ames is probably one of the best that I know of is monocoat work. And I really hope eventually, he'll be able to come up here maybe, or we'll be able to go down here and get some some technology on really doing this level of monocoat work. This is really special. This stuff really is at the upper end of all monocoat work. And Mike, we really appreciated having you stop by. Hey, we had a great visit. Part of what modeling's about. Now, whenever we make one of these up for a neighbor, needless to say, it's oversized, and there's no point doing all the trimming on it. I have the mold marked, and I can pretty much lay it out from the top view. I can trim this to shape and get the bottom laid in. And boy, I tell you, that is really one of the biggest time savings I've ever run into, as opposed to carving. And by the way, we can do these for anybody that's got a Brodak Nobler kit, a green box Nobler, or even a custom frame. We can run off one of these shells in a matter of one-day service. And we have the new computer maven over here. Hey, are we online yet?
We are.
John Poffia wants to know, are we online yet? Send him a letter. Tell him I love him. Now, in putting all our books up on the computer, she's determined that every single person in the world owes me money. So you guys that owe me money, get a checkbook out and write her a check, or she's going to put you on the online, what is this, AOL?
Yes, I'm trying to figure it out.
The bad debt to Wendy list. Oh man, we're entering the computer age here, baby. I try to chew these up with the plans, but obviously leave about a 1/16 of an inch extra so the customer can fine-tune it. Well, you can see how nice that trimmed out right even with the line, the parting line on both sides. Now the other trick that I've really come to appreciate is do all the sanding right on the mold. Don't sand these parts in midair. Get all of, or as much of the sanding as you can. And in this case, when you combine the time you can save with a fiberglass cowl, add it to the time you can save with this, you probably take a nice chunk off the time it takes to actually build yourself a nice Nobler. In this case, I would expect we're going to be doing more and more orders on this, and we try to, every time, now I've done these in 1/8 inch, this one is 3/32, and I wasn't sure this was going to be stiff enough. Done them with laminates, pieces of 16th and 32nd, but this one looks like, unless it's just in the quality of the wood quality was excellent. I'm going to weigh this before I'm finished here. Now, the one little split we had will sand right out. Just do as much of the sanding on the mold as possible. And if you like carbon blocks, hey, be my guest if you like buying them and paying for them and working a full-time job so you can try to get 4 to 6 pound wood when you have this kind of technology. It really does take a lot of the work out of the flame, makes it a lot more enjoyable. Right. Now the final weight on this piece after sanding, oh, this is nice. This is one of the nicer ones. You zero out the scale. 6 grams. If you can carve that block and make it less than 6 grams and have all that integrity and rigidity, well, good luck. I think you can, but still a lot of work. And there's another good analogy, not a great one, but a good one. Just as this is a big improvement over carving the blocks in my estimation, same thing as we have a computer, going to hopefully take hundreds of hours of Karen's bookkeeping and simplify them and get all our bad debt creditors on the Visa card list. I don't know yet. I'm not a crazy man about computers, but I think this is the top blocks and the computer are a step forward, that's for sure. Now, today's mail, wow. Is this ever a cool story? This comes from Don Boca in Walled Lake, Michigan. And I'm reading right off his letter because it's really wonderful. Enclosed some pictures. Yup, help is on the way for your Spitfires. Hurricane is a Vico kit. I built in the early 60s. I have a dated picture of it saying 1962. This set of pictures was taken in February 1998. 54 ounces. Must have used lead paint back then with a Johnson 35 Stunt Supreme. Performance was marginal. I got it put into plastic wrap and has been unused since the 60s. Always liked it, so I dug it back out a few weeks ago and discovered a Silver Fox 40 Lou Willard masterpiece fit the mounts. A change to the extension shaft, needle valve opening, and exhaust opening made it ready to go. Flew the same day. We have been having great weather. What a difference. This thing flies great. The 2.4 brake makes a sound you can't believe. Now it has a muffler and still flies and sounds wonderful. Oddly enough, the satin camo finish became glossy when I succumbed to years of dirt off it, so it now shines. It looks like a pretty good finish to me. Anyway, just want to run these pictures through. And that is a classic little Vico kit. I like the cannons. Now I'm wondering if these cannons are not removable. Don, how many times did you break the... Realistically now, I broke mine, and they're removable, and I broke them. It also has a great little Tucker special here. I want to put this on the tape, too. Made from FM plans. 38 ounces with a Lou Willard Fox 35. Beautiful little plane. Of course, the predecessor to the Spitfire. Says he wanted the Tucker special is... current. I wanted it painted simple like a 30s racer, Supermarine SB6, granddaddy of the gorgeous Spitfires. Well, you certainly captured that well. I have to tell you, this really is a gorgeous little thing. Now, Don, I'll tell you, I'm so thankful for you. I'm going to send you a free set of plans to the profile Brodak soon-to-be kit Cardinal. Beautiful plane, beautiful. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it a whole lot. Another crazy day on the horizon. Just can't seem to ever get back to working in the shop. Now, no, this is not a new building table. But this is. So I'm going to show this, because I had a thought about this. Karen is doing this as part of her job. She's making a horse racing game for senior citizens. And she's doing this all on her own as a volunteer thing. So one of the things we tried to do, we used John Brodak tape. We bought this board, and we're going to cut out some balsa wood horses. This ultimately becomes a horse racing game where the senior citizens play with it. How many people you have in that senior citizen thing, Karen?
Well, horse racing, about 100.
100? Got 100 participants. Maybe we can bring them all to the Nationals this year. Another good use for John Brodak tape. I love it. Now you're probably thinking, hey, you have all this extra 1/8" balsa wood laying around. You order it, comes in a little bit too heavy to make that great new stunt ship you're going to build. Well, you know what you do? Trace out pigs on it and send them to Karen for her job. So this is one of the little things we have to make. And of course, just like we make a balsa wood fireplace, making balsa wood pigs. No balsa wood is too heavy. We also have to make little bunnies. So all you guys that have been stealing all my 4 to 6 pound wood, now I get my revenge. Now look at this beautiful pig painting tournament.
This is a bunny.
I hope Steve DeJulia's wife is rolling off the couch right now.
This is for senior citizens.
Oscar and Catherine are
Bunny
going to...
racing.
Oscar, this is the deal. Listen, we don't have cat racing. We have bunny racing, pig racing.
And horse racing.
Where's the pigs? Oh my God, one of these looks like a cardinal pig. He's yellow. Oh my God, look at this. Look at these, a metal flake yellow pig. Can you believe that? A star? Look at this.
Come on, that's great, isn't it?
A metal flake pig. I don't believe it. Oh my God, this is great. A pink pig. I knew you'd have to make a...
This is a bunny, Wendy.
It's a pig. Same thing.
No.
No difference. Oh, no wonder I never get a Spitfire thing. See, now these are supposed to be for a senior citizen game, like like a Monopoly game. And I was thinking, instead of putting bunnies and rabbits and horses, why don't we just make little faces of stump flyers? And then we could get the senior citizens to score us and win concourse awards and everything. I don't know. Losing my mind. I'm going to bed. See you tomorrow. I want to show you a great story. Really great story. I buffed out this whole plane previously. I come back today to buff out a couple little spots that still needed to be buffed. I'll show you what happened. This is, the truth is, if I bought a pumpkin farm, they'd cancel Halloween. These little tabs were like little razor blades, and all the while I was buffing it out, I didn't catch myself. And here I am. Took a chunk out of my finger, took a chunk out of my fingernail. So today's helpful tip from the world of Wendy is put tape over the little sharp edges before you go buff it out. And if you think that isn't a good tip, that's worth its weight in pumpkin juice, boy. I'm telling you, it's really buffing out nice, too. So I think my hand is buffing out nice, too. Nasty. No matter how really careful you are, because of the fact, and this is just a fact of life, there's so little paint on the bottom of this plane. You can see that little edge came right up. At that point in time, you're done buffing. Another little spot here. Now, had I put the same amount of clear on the top as the bottom, I wouldn't have that, but that's not the case. But this really did buff up so beautifully. I didn't want to get too cute and start turning it into decoupage. There's only two spots right here. There's one spot on the top that I need to do a repair. I stuck my fingernail in it. I'm telling everybody clip their fingernails, and I got a hangnail or something here that just caught and put a little dent. I'm going to try to fix that too. But taping these things up is a good idea if you're going to do this, boy. And right in here, I was just buffing this area out right here, and all of a sudden, but it just goes to show you. It just goes to show you. This is why I always like to have plenty of touch-up paint that has plenty of extra pigment in, and the smallest little brush you can find. We'll just put one tiny little stripe right over that area, wait a couple of days, re-hit it, put another stripe, maybe 3 or 4 times, do that, and that repair should blend. Should is a good word. It's better than leaving it here, because eventually you'll go right down to the tissue because that's a sharp area there, and because you've already gotten through most of the paint. So no matter, even if you don't do a real nice job touching it up, you do want to touch it up when you go through like that. What you want to have is a brush with some kind of long fuzzy hairs, because you want to do this in one. You don't want to go back. You get one stripe and leave it on, and don't go back. The little trick here is just to lay on one bead of paint, one stripe. You're not going to get it to cover and be like brand new. It's not even going to match real perfect the first time you do it. But what in effect you're doing is making it that it won't get worse later on. In fact, there's another little spot here. 3 little spots on the bottom. Now, one of the other new products we're working on, I don't have them in stock yet, but by the time you get this tape, I'll probably have them, is a profile aluminum gear that's nicely polished, of course. The problem is, if you sell these unpolished, people want to know, how do you polish them easily? Well, there's no substitute that I know of for getting a nice quick shine on a piece of 2024 than SOS with the blue soap. That kind of gets a nice shine on in a matter of a couple of minutes. And then, of course, we have a buffing wheel. So what I plan on doing is selling these unbuffed and buffed both. And I'm sure eventually John Brodak will have these in his catalog. This is a real handy item for all the profile planes. It acts as a shock absorber in a crash. It makes mounting up the gear onto the profile sides real easy. We used to have these in a much smaller size. I've been out of stock on them for almost a year. The supplier never came through with a second order, but these look real nice. These have the look of being just what the doctor ordered for that profile Cardinal that you're going to be building. I know Rudy Ryback, you're going to call me right up and say, send me a set. So I'm getting this set ready for you. Now, I can also take some of these over to the anodizing shop, get them polished a little bit here and get them anodized. Again, if you don't know the trick of using SOS with soap, if you start using sandpaper and everything, it'll take you forever to get one of these buffed up. The whole trick is knowing that SOS, that's soap. If you want to polish a piece of raw aluminum and you're not familiar with that yet, you want to put a little wax on the wheel, ordinary candle wax, and some red compound. The black is a little rougher than the red. Black compound is rougher than red. White is the smoothest of all. White I don't find usable here in the shop. But what you want to do, determine if you're getting a nice polish from the red. You need to polish a little spot. This is time consuming. Like anything, buffing, polishing takes time. Whether you're polishing a muffler, in fact, while we're making a mess here, I'll polish up that K&B muffler that Bill Mazzoni sent me. What you want to do is get a little test. All aluminum alloys polish just a little bit differently. Now, if this isn't doing such a great job, you put a little black on. The reason you don't put the black first is if you put black and red on, it in effect is black. It goes to the highest grit. It doesn't go to the lowest. So you want to do a little area. Get a little look, what kind of look you're getting. Is that acceptable? You want to keep going? You want to spend, I would say roughly, you can see yourself in it. I would say roughly you spend 10-15 minutes on each leg if it's your plane. If you're doing these for a boss, you better be a lot faster than that. Now this is the muffler that Bill Mazzoni sent us for the K&B 40. We haven't run this yet, of course. But you can see there's tooling marks in it that I'd like to get out. I'd like the planes to have as nice a finish as possible. So I want to get some wet and dry paper. Usually 600 will get these tooling marks right out. A little block of balsa wood and some 600. Now, if you just go and buff this without getting the tooling marks out, you in effect are just going to have little ripples, or you're not really going to have a real, like a pro job. The first thing you want to do is get out the tooling marks, no matter what, any kind of muffler that you're polishing. Now a lot of times what they'll do with a machinist part like this is they'll take and sandblast it so you can't see the tooling marks, which is okay, but then as soon as it gets covered with grit and oil, I don't know, you know. But if you polish it, once it's polished, then to clean it up is only a couple-minute job. As I said before, if we were down at the machine shop, what we would be able to do and not able to do here is use that big giant buffing wheel, and this thing we could polish the landing gear maybe in 15-20 minutes a piece, 10 minutes if we got into a good rhythm. But we only have the small wheel, so it really is labor intensive. Now, if you understand about tooling marks, you know that you have to take the tooling marks out first. And the first time you buff something that doesn't have the tooling marks out of it, it's kind of frustrating. Now see, let me just see if I can show this up close. You can see little by little, I'm getting almost all, see there's some of them are still in there and some aren't. This side's got all the tooling marks in it, but getting those on a flat piece of wood, you could even probably use some 600. This looks like real soft aluminum. You never really know. The harder the aluminum is, the nicer you can get the polish on it. The softer aluminums don't really hold a shine real well. It's the same as finishing, and I emphasize that on the dope finishing video. Hard material, diamonds, sparkle and shine. Soft material, much more difficult to get any kind of a nice finish out of. Now you can see we're getting down there now. A couple more swipes. Getting rid of those tooling marks, so important. I just had a thought, it really is a big time saver if you keep this under running water. Now I'm doing this up close just for camera purposes, but if you're doing this, the reason for this is the water cutting fluid. If you had a cutting fluid tank, cleaning tank, you could run some cutting fluid through here. Water is fine though, especially for wet and dry sandpaper. Keep in mind the water is floating away all the little material that you're taking off by doing this. And again, what we're looking for is that flat, just like on the buffing video. And once you get mastered on some of these little skills that it takes to do this, you can really turn out some beautiful stuff. It's not real tricky, it's just labor intensive. That's probably ready for the wheel right now. But you want to have all the scratches out of it before you go to the wheel. Now again, I want to thank Bill Mazzoni for donating this muffler to our cause. And we'll try to do a little fine tuning on it. Obviously we're coming up on a flying season here. Pass on whatever we find works. This little setup. Certainly a nicely made unit. Now, I always feel better if I can teach somebody how to polish, how to paint, than actually, even though I do a lot of polishing in a big machine shop, polished an awful lot of parts, gun parts, and whatever. I always feel better if you can teach somebody the skill or pass on most of it to them. I always feel like that's worth just a little bit more. It's starting to come up relatively quickly. Again, a lot of this stuff just takes time. Just labor intensive. If you have a bigger, more powerful wheel, obviously it goes quicker. I know you're going to laugh at this, but this is good old Worms. And it is really, when you really want to get that final shine, you want to go out with the Harley boys and hang out with all the tough guys, and you want that chrome-like shine. Gorhams and Final Shine in that order. It's a nice little addition to our little project plane. And of course I'll eventually want to test. I hope Randy Holcroft is making me a tube muffler. Nice long one. And we'll be able to test some mufflers once we get some flying time here. Kind of a nice looking nose section, if I don't say so myself. Anyway, I always try to take the little extra time to polish and anodize and plate and do all the detail things. Because I think in the ultimate scheme of things, it's satisfying to me to have them just nice like that. Now in today's mail I got this. This is George Spar. Everybody knows his son Justin was the 1983 National Junior Champ. May remember that, the year of the Meg. Anyway, this is a nice video that George puts out. I'll get the address in case you want to get a copy. From Aerospace Composites on how to vacuum bag rings. And since in the last issue of Pamper we've seen Dave Fitzgerald and Tedder vacuum bagging tails, maybe appropriate, maybe information you want to get off of this video. It's an excellent video. A lot of good information that I've gotten from magazines, but this shows it hands-on. Now George Spar, of course, is the guy in the video, and Ed Gallagher sent me a whole bunch of other things that he's been clipping out of magazines for doing composite formers, doing fiberglass sheeting. Is a wealth of interesting information stuff here of putting and storing sheets of fiberglass on balsa wood and using it as formers, ring skins, just on and on and on. He sent me a whole bunch of stuff here. Another nice thing, I guess most people have seen this book, Master Modeling. Harry Higley's book. There's a lot of good tips and tricks in here. And in fact, there's some stuff on foam wings here. This is the kind of thing that you really can't limit yourself if you really want to take advantage of all the skills of modeling. You really don't want to just take any one system or any one person's way of doing things. You want to combine them all and find the ones that suit you the best. Now, I know Ken is already experimenting with other kind of foam systems, feather cuts, all kinds of stuff. There's a wealth of good information. Now, Ed really enjoyed the trip to Norman's, and he's talking about a one-template method of cutting foam wings. Again, a lot more stuff we're going to try to post on the video if we can. By the way, the next thing, you'll love this. I didn't open this up yet, but we were on the phone today, and Ed was telling me this is a killer thing. It's a squirrel hair brush. Now, Ed doesn't know that the squirrels in my yard eat all my bird seed, so I may have an unlimited supply of squirrel hair brushes real soon, with the squirrel still attached to them, in fact. Ooh, this does feel nice. I gotta see how much, let's see. Pure Squirrel, Israel. They have squirrels in Israel? Ooh, that is a nice brush. So, Ed, I don't think I'm gonna give you this back. Maybe I'll just send Ed a nice empty box back and say the mailman kept it. Squirrel hair brushes. From his note, especially good on I-beamers, squirrel hair brushes for use on I-beamers and open bay wings. Help eliminate sanding brush marks. I'm sending some videos and books you might like to see. Anyway, ooh, that is nice. Son of a gun. That is nice. Ed, you're okay. I don't care what Ken Thompson says about you. Anyway. See, this is what I love about modeling. He's sending me a tip that I've already tried, and it does work well, of laying in a piece of half-ounce or three-quarter-ounce glass cloth first into the mold to get a nicer finish. That's another way of doing it. I've been having real good luck using Cabicel. Then he sent an extra little article that Bob Aronstein had written for how to dye silk span. Anyway, Ed, hey, Ed, of all the things you've sent, though, I gotta tell you, I don't think this squirrel, this is almost erotic. This is the nicest brush I've ever felt. Unbelievable. I'm gonna have to get me a couple of these, and we'll be putting this on the video. Now, this is, let's see if somebody out there can copy the name down. It's Rexus, I can't even read what my this is, Rexus 350 Pure Squirrel, Israel. Thanks a lot to Ed Gallagher, and thanks to the squirrels of the world for making their tails available. I found this really interesting. I'm going to read this. This will go through in a minute or two, but listen to how this works. Lightweight, durable fiberglass and epoxy sheeting can easily be made to order. On one side it has a glass-like finish, and on the other it's textured so it bonds well to your model. This finished sheeting is ideal for covering wings or building structural members such as bulkheads, firewalls, hatches, and the like. How light is this sheeting? O-Pee-Chee wing sheeting that's 0.23 thick, that's 1/64 of an inch, with monocoat weighs 0.92 ounces square foot, or 0.22 ounces square foot more than this much stronger fiberglass sheeting. Use a 3-ounce glass cloth. This sheeting weighs 0.7 ounces a square foot. So you go to step 1. Now, I read this and I was shocked at what a good idea this is. I'm definitely going to have to try this. Choose a pane of glass that's large enough to suit your project's needs. Clean the glass, apply a mold release. We know how to do that. Part-all mold release. We have part-all. Is offered by Wick's Aircraft Supply, and wait 10 minutes for it to dry. Then cut out a piece of 3-ounce cloth. It weighs 3 ounces per square yard. That's 1 inch smaller in the perimeter of your glass pane. So obviously you have a piece of glass, the part-all agent, and the cloth. Lay the cloth on the glass. Step 2, mix approximately a ½ ounce of safety epoxy. That's the stuff that George Spar sells. A 2-part resin epoxy for each square. It's a finishing resin, by the way. For each square foot of glass cloth, and pour the mixture over it. Use a plastic card. You can see he's got like a trowel. He's troweling it on evenly over the glass. Cut a piece of plastic from a garbage bag. The piece should be larger than the pane of glass. So obviously now it's laminated between the glass and a garbage bag. Bevel the ends of a 2-inch piece of 1/2-inch wooden dowel so it won't rip or dig into the plastic. Working from the center, roll the dowel across the plastic to smooth the epoxy and push any excess past the edge of the glass cloth into the rim of the glass pane. So obviously it's like rolling dough, probably a starburst pattern would work good. Step 7, leave the plastic on while the epoxy cures in a warm 80 to 90 degree Fahrenheit area for 24 hours. Then peel off the plastic bag. Step 8, and this is the last step. Peel the glass cloth off the glass pane. And now you'll notice, and I've seen guys in EAA do this all the time, it has one surface that looks like a piece of glass, because of course it is a piece of glass. The other side still has the cloth impregnated, the little rough texture to it. So it really, really makes an exceptional surfacing material. Notice the perfectly finished surface of this flexible, light, super strong sheeting. Its upper surface retains a light texture from the weave of the cloth that can be cut to any shape and glued with spray-on adhesive or attached with double-sided tape to model surfaces with its textured side facing down. It can also be used to create super strong bulkhead formers. Now, you know how we make the bulkhead formers? They basically are doing the same thing down here. Well, what they're doing is they're gluing the material that they made in the previous article to balsa wood and making something that replaces plywood. Step 1, vertical grain balsa strengthens the composite bulkheads of formers tremendously in much the same way a shear web strengthens a ring. Cut the balsa so that the grain is perpendicular to the glass sheeting. Number 2, put a piece of fiberglass sheeting rough side up on the same plastic and put a vertical grain balsa on the fiberglass sheeting. Leave about 1/8 to 1/4 inch of its perimeter uncovered. If one piece isn't big enough, you can use several pieces of balsa to fill out the length or width of the former. Glue the balsa to the sheeting's rough side with the same epoxy that you used to make the fiberglass sheeting, e.g. safety epoxy. Using a sanding block or another flat tool to ensure that the balsa pieces are aligned properly and allow the laminate to cure in a warm room for 24 hours. Then sand the top of the balsa until it's perfectly flat. Don't worry about sanding it smooth, just make it true. Step 4, vacuum the balsa surface to remove any residual sawdust. Lay down a second sheet of fiberglass rough side up and epoxy the balsa side of the laminate to it. Step 5, in this edge view of a finished laminate, you can see the balsa's vertical grain. Now you can cut a former or bulkhead, and remember, this is vertical. The grain is going between the two pieces. This would be less strong if the grain were going this way. You can cut a former or bulkhead to the shape you need. This composite laminate can be used to build other structural components that have to be strong yet light: spars, landing gear, belly pans, firewalls, hatches, etc. And of course, Ed never fools around. He sends me a nice 1-foot square sample. This stuff is indestructible. And I have used this in the past for several things. It's end grain with a sheeting. I guess that's how they make that sheeting. I often wondered how they do that. Now see, constantly adding to our knowledge here. Even if this is something you didn't want to use, there's a thinner piece. See, I've already cut spars and pieces out of this. Tremendous strength. I know they make boats out of the same way. And also the ultimate is when you have Nomex, which is like an egg crating material. It's flexible. And then you have this material, carbon fiber on both sides. This is almost like you can kill somebody with this piece. Anyway, a lot of interesting technologies. Even if these technologies don't appeal to you, I always like to stay abreast of them just for my own information and for my own. I guess I just like to know. I guess there's a knowledge. Just having the knowledge, wanting to have it or having it is part of modeling. Anyway, hope you've gotten something that you can use out of that. Now, played this video a few times just so I could memorize what was on it. This is really some good information. If you're into any kind of, if you want to try vacuum bagging, George Spar, get a copy of this video, watch it 4 or 5 times, and I'm sure George, one thing I can say personally for George, his technical support is excellent. He's a modeler, he knows how to do things, he knows what you need.
And that should give you a good bonded system.
Good video, by the way. Excellent video. See, this is what I like about modeling, is sharing some of this stuff. This is the most exciting part of the hobby to me.
We're going to go.
You know, we all know all judging of everything is subjective, but this is not judging. This is really the sharing of all different technologies that really makes this worthwhile. This really is a lot better than I thought it would be. George, you're okay. Excellent. He's actually showing you how to make a glider wing. This was from Ed Gallagher, and I appreciate, again, from Ed, I appreciate the loan of this material.
And open the bag.
About the little time I have left tonight, Bill Hummel asked me to, this is a picture, a set of plans from Pat Johnson of Harold Price's Crusader with the retracts, of course. Now this is his original drawings, original plans. It's 6 sheets into this set of plans, so I just was noticing, something I had already forgotten is how Harold Price, and this is, boy, I bet Noel Drindak would be just in love with this idea. Check out again, Noel, how this control system works here. This is really, really something cool. I think, Bill, I'm going to do this for Bill Hummel, of course. This is a free job, one of my free jobs. Here's something. Show this to Noel. This is really something cool. This is really something ahead of his time. I had seen that in real life when he did it, and I forgot about it. Again, so many neat things on this plane. A set of plans well worth having, just for fun. Anyway, this is one thing. Now I'm going to try to trace out a Valkyrie fuselage from my memory and the photos I have here. But again, we're not trying for an exact copy for Bill. What I'd hope he'd build is something that's real close, and get some pictures from John Misk and Larry Screensy. Both have pictures of the original planes. Get some photos and enjoy building it. It'll be a real tribute to Harold. Again, if you want to copy this tape, it's from Aerospace Composites. Telephone number 510-352-2022. George Spar is the gentleman's name that owns the company. 14210 Doolittle Drive. Hey, nice address, Doolittle Drive. San Leonardo, California, 94577. A good tape to have whether you build gliders, RC, control line stunt. Good information. I know this is for this. I'm trying to do a sketch on Harold Price's plans of what I remember the Valkyrie to be like. I remember this trim. This is the one I refinished. This used to be my number. My number is now 72618. The 12618 was my original number. I remember these are the things I remember, Bill, that might be significant. I remember each one had just a little bit different rudder, but basically the same shape. They had very short tail moment arms, which look like that's what's shown on the plan. They always had needle nose spinners. The blue and pink one had wing gear with wheel pants, and I've shown that on the sketch. The other 2 or 3, depending if you count the first one, the red one would have been like Nobler gear, wire gear with just wheel pants. No fairings, just wheel pants. They also had really tiny cowls, except for the pink and blue one. The pink and blue one had a larger cowl. But again, I'm trying to do this from memory, and obviously my memory is about as reliable as a French fry right now. But if I remember correctly, this is a picture that was shot in Chicago in 1962. This was the final version, the pink and blue one, and this had, you really can't see the colors well in this photo, but it really had some unusual hand-mixed colors. And he had his own molded canopy. I'm sure somewhere in the pictures that I donated to Win Paul's bibliography, there's some really exotic things when this was in raw wood. And I looked for an hour and I couldn't find them. And I spent the whole rest of the night, Bill. Bill, you owe me a pizza big time to sketch out this, and I sketched it back and forth about 15 times. But let me show you what I came up with. I know you'll be disgusted. Anyway, that's real close, real close. And as I always do, I just try to give it a mind's eye. I think you basically, now just for reference point, the last one, the blue and pink one, had this type of a scoop. The other ones, all the other ones, just basically had this with the motor head sticking out. As far as I can remember, Larry Scarinzi and John Misk both would be a little more knowledgeable than I am on this. There's also some pictures of this I know on the old, and I think Larry still has a copy of these old movies, these old Harold Price movies. My master copy has long since disappeared into the black hole in space, thanks to me being foolish enough to loan it out. But Bill, I hope this, hey, the one thing you do owe me is a lot of pictures. I better see pictures of every step of this. This is gonna be more significant than any model I've done in the last couple of years. This will be a nice tribute to Harold Price. This is a whole night's work, sketching and erasing. Don't forget dial 1-800-PIZZA and go watch that baby. Again, it's the unusual wing and tail. I don't know how many people even know about this. Had the wing cuff, very unusual Manta style wing. Really exotic looking plane, one of my favorites of all time, the Crusader, the Valkyrie. And we'll see what Bill Hummel can come up with. Spare no expense, Bill. It's worth it. Now today, I got a little bit of time here. We're going out to do a plumbing job, and I want to get a couple hours this morning, a couple hours tonight in. One of the things I want to do, I haven't used one of these tip weight boxes yet. This is the Brodak little tip weight box, and I want to set up the lead weights with some kind of a little spring or confinement in there that holds them in place. The one thing you never want to do with a tip weight box, in fact, maybe I'll get some of the little detailing work done on this today while I have the plane out. And see, the idea is I want to get the deck perfectly clean and get all these little other jobs, plumbing jobs and stoves and everything out of the way before I start that I-beam plane. Because once I lay out the table, I don't want to have hopefully have any interruption. Anyway, I want to buff this little box out first. Lay out some lead weights, figuring out, we'll probably start by starting with 1.5 ounces of tip weight in the outboard wing. Now, one of the things, see, my tip weight boxes are typically a little bit different, is you need to make these, you see how that weight slides in and out, and you can still line up the bolt. And I had to take a little bit off of the corners of the weight. I'm going to start just roughly with 1.5 ounces of tip weight. And I know this tip is a little heavier than the other one, but the right way to do this if you want to start out is once the plane is totally assembled and you have the gear and wheel pants and everything on it, is put a grain scale under this tip and pick it up by the tail wheel. And from that point on, now, if you just put this cap on right now, you're going to have a problem. That thing's going to be bouncing around and rattling around forever. So the choices would be, one of the things I thought about trying to do is get a spring here. I'm trying to estimate how big the spring. I don't have a spring that size. So I'll, for now, just fill that up with Kleenex as an alternative. Okay, I tried Kleenex in there. I didn't like the way Kleenex was. I took some closed cell foam. This is just ordinary foam. And I'm thinking as I pinch this bolt down in place, of course I have to allow for the fact that I'm going to add or take away tip weight from time to time. I think this will be one of the alternatives, is I can pack this in there. Assuming I can pack it in there. If I have to trim it down. May have to trim that down a little bit. I don't want that tip weight loose in any way. And trim this down just a little bit. It's just sticking out just a little bit too much. And this is just ordinary clothes, so you could probably even use a sponge. Well, this looks like it's going to be a good way to do it, but again, I'll check this certainly after the first day of flying. Always do that. Uh-oh, I don't like that. Something is loose in there. I got to put more sponge. See, this is why it just takes a little time to figure this out. A little bit, maybe heavier sponge, more sponge. What I did, I made up a bunch of little balsa when I'm going to try. Again, these are the little things you kind of have to improvise. That's a little bit too tight. I wanted these, there it is. I wanted these to be a reasonably tight fit. Now I even made some thin ones so I can kind of keep these in the toolbox just to shim this. Yeah, I like this a lot better. The sponge just wasn't strong enough. Remember, this is all little details. If you've never had the tip weight box self-destruct, the weights come flying out and usually they hit your best friend right in an open bay wing. There you go. Now that's what. Now, every time you wipe the plane off, it's a good idea until this kind of beds in, but we know we're close now. So if we needed to, we could just add a shim of cardboard, a shim of paper, and if we take lead out, we'll put balsa wood in. So we need some balsa wood and some lead shims. Again, this may be a little more complex than the normal way that I do it, but it's definitely a functional way of doing it. And I would start with no less than 1.5 ounces. Do one thing at a time. We'll get this out. We'll spend the rest of the day trimming this out, getting all the little details done. Now all I want to do at this point in time is just get, this isn't a fine tuning, this is just a rough tuning to see roughly, see, just by putting in 1 ounce of tip weight, you don't know if you have 1 ounce, 1.5 ounces, or what, until you actually let that wing kind of balance the body. Now I'm balancing it on the rudder, and on the motor crankshaft, anything that will minimize, let's see how much we actually have in there. We actually have a little under 1 ounce. So I better put two, I better take 2 of those balsa shims out. A little bit under 1 ounce. See, this gives you the true reading, just a ballpark. And again, I'd want to start with no less, so I'll put 2 more of those shims in there. I'd want to start with no less than 1.5 ounces for a first flight. And that's a good way to do it. In the buffing operation and cleaning this up, there's all kind of grit and gook in the hinge lines. Before I go on to the next step, I just like to constantly take that old 320 sandpaper and make sure I haven't got something gumming up my, there's something right here. Stuff just balls up and gums up. Again, more little details. But before you fly a plane, you hopefully have the controls as free as possible. You always have the option of taping the hinge lines before or after a test flight. In this case, I want to just make sure all the hinges are nice and free. Now, I always like to start with balancing the plane roughly on the spar, which is about 15% of the wing, and get the lead outs wherever that balance is. The mean average point of the lead outs roughly 1 inch behind that. It's a good starting point. And I don't mean this lead out or this lead, I mean the mean average is what counts. When you move this lead out, that mean average is what moves. And you like to have the mean average point roughly 1 inch behind the center of gravity if you measure from the hinge line forward. And in this case, just looking at it really rough, that's about 1 inch. Again, we're going to fine tune this, we're going to do a final tune of vertical CG and everything, but I just like to get this in the ballpark so I can sit and look at it, weigh it, and evaluate what I want to do with it as far as the first flight goes. Now, when finishing up the detailing, one of the last things is, of course, the tail wheel. I always want to make sure when I look down the tail wheel, I'm pretty much in line with the hinge line. I'm not out by 50 degrees. In fact, if anything, you might want to put a little negative offset so it rolls away from the middle of the circle. But a good starting point is obviously 0. One of the good things you can do if you don't want to bother making all these bends and everything, you buy these wires already bent from John, which is a nice handy little thing, inexpensive. And I always want to get the wheel, in other words, look at the wire is bent in toward you, so that if the solder joint fails, the wheel doesn't go flying off the plane and hit somebody in the head. Always have that facing inward. Well, no matter what tail wheel you use, what I like to do is countersink it just a little bit. And what that does, it doesn't rub on the bend then. The bend in the wire, a lot of times what will happen is you get this nice free-rolling tail that binds up in this corner. It also allows me to cut off a little piece of this small SIG eyelet, just the smallest little piece, and make a real nice solder joint almost flush with the side, so I don't have this hanging out here so high. And you're wiping a plane off, and of course you're constantly, it's a pain in the neck. It gives a nice joint. And always solder the tail wheel on without the rubber in place, and get the hub free rolling, oiled, and everything. Everything is still like this. And when it's all cleaned up, just snap the rubber on for the wheel. Good tip to save you some aggravation. You can see how that little brass bushing works, and it slides right in. And it gives you a real nice solder joint. Now I'll trim this off with a parting wheel, and I'll have a nice smooth solder joint there. Make sure everything's free. And it's ready for a nice Stay Bright silver solder, deflux with baking soda and water. Now what I do, because I'm not the world's greatest solderer, just protect the paint with a little bit of tin foil, or you can turn the plane upside down. It's difficult for me with my eyes being bad to do that, but press that bushing in and that's ready to solder. How many times has anybody ever soldered the tail wheel right to the, even though it's aluminum, what happens is the corrosion gets in there and locks up the tail wheel. So right now, be sure you get that baking soda and water going. This is just baking soda and water. Make sure the hub is nice and free. Small detail, but when you leave out little details, get to the flying field, you land and a tail wheel doesn't turn. Oh boy. You get a little... Yeah, I think that's a nice aerodynamic and nice clean joint. Doesn't catch your finger when you wipe the airplane off. Obviously you want to check that the wheel turns free, put a little bit of grease on it, PJ1 is good. Make sure that axle is kind of parallel, or if anything, turning the plane away from you. Another detail out of the way. One by one we're closing in on getting this guy ready to fly, and I hope we get some weather. Now while I'm waiting for basically the next couple little operations to go on, I can let some of this PJ1 just soak in. Free the controls up. One of the next things I have to do is make the push rod up. I like this as free as possible when I start. No matter how careful you are and you do a plane and you don't have the controls removable to the end, you always wind up with a little bit of paint or compound or something in those hinges. And these things should be as free as a bird right now. And that's about all I'm going to have time for now, but when I get back from work today, maybe tonight I can get the push rod made. I got to do up the wheel pants and get everything from the nose forward secured. Maybe even get some props painted later this week. hey, it's coming along. It's right about at this time you really start thinking about, yeah, let's go flying. Except El Nino has been taking all our flying days away. Anyway, see you later. Now, what I want to do here, I want to lay out the push rod. One of the choices I really don't have, I always would like to have the push rod ends facing out, but because there's so little clearance between the fuselage here, I'm going to take a chance and route it the other way, but leave plenty of material on that I can get an eyelet on there. It's just one of the compromises that, well, everything's a compromise here. Again, I'm trying to avoid making any bends and then bend it back kind of bends, if possible. I can lay out the length here because I want to have an adjustment at the back. I want to have a little bit of a slip joint just like in the Spitfires so that I can fine-tune the elevator to flap ratios. This is not my first choice, but the choice would be, if I did it the other way, I would need to have a bend going back, and I don't like to have any extra bends in the wire. So I'm just going to go with putting some notches in here, some copper wire and a washer and eyelet, but make sure for sure that I have a real secure joint up here. And because it's out in the open, it really shouldn't be too much of a problem. You can see the little notches. And that'll allow safety wire to get in there and act as a redundancy system. Now, I made the push rod maybe 1.5 inches or 2 inches short on this side, because what I want to do is I want to bend the other end of this. Again, I'm trying to make this end as long as possible, so even if it does loosen up, it can't slide right out. And of course, I have to make a little fair lead for right in the middle. Unless you make an arrow shaft, you really have to brace the middle of the push rod. I just took a little piece of 1/8 inch plywood, drilled a hole in it. Take one of these Bud McKnight sanding sticks and just dress it off. Now, one of the things what this allows me to do, you can make this out of a piece of nylon, steel, anything, but I made it a little bit oversized. I'm going to take some thin CA, put a little bit of a finish on it, and once it's installed, then just paint it with a paintbrush. All I want to really make sure is that it's a nice sliding fit, and I'm sure it is. A nice fit right on top of the push rod. I don't have any binding because I don't really know where I'm going to locate this yet. But imagine if you put this on and that little hatch cover that goes over the push rod, you put those hatches on and all these little pins and needles that stick out of the plane, you turn the plane into a porcupine, and then the buffing part of it gets so labor intensive. This saves you so much work not having all these little doodads and push rods and things on the plane at this point in time. It's a big time saving. I'm just making a little oversized at this point in time. I remember the old trick of just putting a couple of coats of thin CA, wipe it with a Q-tip or a paper towel, and what it does, it gives you an instant finish, and all you need is a little paintbrush later on. You can get almost an exact match on the finish here without a lot of hassle. One of the best tricks in all model aviation, getting that quick finish on the little parts. Just let it kick with the dust from the Q-tips. Now, when doing this kind of soldering joint, it's real handy to work in this dimension, but of course use some tin foil. And of course the old chair, old bar stool with a rag around it. It's just a nice way to support the model while you're working on it. Nice little, one of those tips that I love. It's always free. You can use these little wood shims to shim this up, get it in alignment while I wrap this with wire and get the eyelet set. Again, that's a handy way to work on a plane. You can see how nice that wire holds the little brass eyelet in, and that's ready for the same thing, Stay Bright silver solder and defluxing. Now you can usually tell if a solder joint is good. It'll be relatively shiny. That's nice and free. A little WD-40 on that joint, now we can assemble the back of the push rod. And pretty much the same copper wire setup, the notches in the wire, the whole thing. This piece of push rod then will connect with this one, and of course we put this, the little keeper on already. Otherwise, how do you get it on? The other thing, while I was setting this up, I was standing here holding the soldering iron for about 10 minutes and realized it wasn't plugged in. I'm sure everybody's done that. I said, well, this soldering iron's getting old. It's getting like me. Anyway, always plug the soldering iron in, a good tip. Now, before I line this up, obviously I want to wrap some copper wire around this. I want to have the slip joint roughly 1 inch. And a couple of notes, I would never put a piece of tubing in here. I know that's, a lot of people think that's cute and everything, but acid stays inside the middle of the tube and eventually it rots away. I feel it's much better, and I haven't had any failures at all with just wrapping this with soft copper wire. And then it gives me a real fine tuning. By heating that joint, I can do this to the elevators while the flaps are in neutral. Very, very cheap insurance policy that everything is lined up. And normally what I do, I wrap this with copper wire, but because this joint is exposed and I'll be able to monitor it, what I did, I took a piece of a little bit oversized, I guess it's 2 sizes bigger than tank tubing, and tried to shove 2 pieces of wire down into it, kind of massaging it with some needle nose pliers. And I want to make 1 piece of this at each end of the joint and then silver solder the whole thing. It just has a little way maybe of making it a little bit neater. I don't know if this is going to work. Now, I would never put this inside of a plane that I hadn't, wanted to seal up the fuselage and never see it again. But on this, because it's a profile, I'll be able to monitor if I see from time to time, especially after I make a few adjustments. It doesn't look so good, I can wrap this, or I can even wrap it when I'm all done with copper wire. But this is really, I guess, a critical thing. This would be a good place to test it, too. It looks like it makes a real nice joint. Now, obviously, one of the first things before I go any further is make sure there's no binding anywhere in this. We're both in neutral. Same amount up and down, roughly. But this will be our fine-tuning. By shortening, heating that joint and shortening it, I'll get an infinite amount of adjustment. And I feel it's much better than a threaded rod, because a threaded rod gives you 8 degrees. It's too much in one direction each way. This you can get in between a thread by 3 or 4, maybe infinite increments. I also have, when the flaps are in neutral, you can see there's just a little bit of slop in the control system. I drill this bushing a little bit oversized. In this case, it's about 5/1000ths with a machinist drill, and the rest are rear end, but I like to have 1/8 of an inch of up, 1/8 of an inch of down, free play in there, before any of the controls catch. And I know there's counterpoints to that, and I know people feel they should make the stab thicker, thinner. There's all kind of systems, but it basically compensates for having small things out of alignment. And actually, a part that a lot of people don't really, compensates for the plane growing in length. When you put it out in the sun, the plane actually does, gliders especially, grow in length, a length that you can measure. Big RC planes grow in length. But even if that's a 64th of an inch, which is probably a lot more, that throws everything. A lot of people don't understand what heat does to a plane, and that's one of the things. Besides warp and surfaces, the total plane gets measurably longer when it gets hotter. But the plane gets longer at a different rate than the push rod, so you're always fighting trim. With that little slop in there, that compensates for it. And it's a very inexpensive way to, if you don't have slop in, it's obviously very inexpensive. Buy a machinist drill and try different increments. You can always put a bushing back, drill at 1/8 inch, and put a bushing back if you don't like the slop. Now, one of the things, the reason we have a fair lead on here, let me show what happens. If you were to use, and I suggest never using anything but 093 push rods, don't use anything lighter for any reason. In the down control, it's no problem at all. That push rod doesn't bend at all. But you'll notice when you go to give it up, and this is what happens in the wind. This is why 1/8 inch horns are better than 3/32 horns. Here's what happens. See that push rod? Now let me move the camera just a little bit so you can see that I'm moving the elevator. And zero in what's happening to that push rod. And that's, if it's an internal thing inside of a fuselage, well, hey, it's even worse. You can't get at it. Now what I want to do is slide my little restrictor to the middle of that bend. It's not quite in the middle. A little bit more. You want to have it right in the center. Now I've got nothing. A little bit further back. Now it's too much. Right there, it's as solid as a rock. One fair lead is usually all you need on a 3/32 rod, or of course you can use an arrow shaft. Now what I'll do is I'll cut this off with a zoner saw, make a very slight little indentation here with a brand new XL blade and drop that in, and make sure I don't have any of this movement, and then just glue it in place. And I move this piece around so many times to find the point at which the maximum bend in the wire was, and it's almost right at the midpoint, even when I do it this way. So what I did, I trimmed that out. Now I'll fill that little pocket with epoxy, and that'll be, I hope, totally bulletproof, totally fuel-proof. Now when it's in its neutral state, I'd like to have complete slop in all directions. I don't want it binding up or binding down, so it took a little chiseling around and whatever to get that little pocket made, but now it'll just be a question of filling that with epoxy, letting this dry, and get a little paintbrush on there and touch it up. Now when I'm mixing up some epoxy with some yellow dye in it, just so that you don't see the seam there. Another nice little detail touch. It's no extra effort to do this. The dye, you can dye epoxy any color you want. Dye is very inexpensive even. Just obviously make sure if you do it, you get it blended in real well, even long after you think it's done. Now you probably could hot stuff this, but I wanted to be absolutely sure fuel wasn't going to work its way in there. I'm going to make this as strong as possible. And another thing you do, you always bump into this when you're wiping a plane off too, so this part has already been pre-soaked in thin CA. You can plug that in and get it self-leveled. Again, I don't remember who told me, but somebody told me the devil is in the details. This is one of them. Being able to mix your own colored epoxy is kind of a little bonus too. It's not a big deal to buy dye. You can buy it from Florida Glue Products. Cheap, couple bucks. You can make all different colors for whatever reason. This is the dye we were using when we molded the spinners, the yellow spinners. I can just put some of this on here just to seal the edge, in fact. Alright. I put some more WD-40 on all the hinge pockets, all the control linkages. That's about all I'm going to get done for this session, but I'll pick this up either tonight, later, maybe after dinner we'll come back down here and work a while. I like to take these Dave Brown wheels and at least put a bushing in them. You need to drill out at least 142 drill so you get a nice press fit in there. Now what that does, that spaces it when you actually get that in the wheel pan, that you're not rubbing, you're not rubbing on the tire.
Remove the color soils off. Red is gray and yellow white.
Now I always like to make sure this is a relatively nice press fit. Again, if in doubt, hey, there we go. And that gives just enough of an edge. Plus the brass bushing, you don't wind up with the wheels chattering, slinking around. It's hard enough to make wheel pants that don't jam on the wheels without having a bushing in them. If you don't have a bushing on the wheels, and this is about the end of this, but that one little detail, and by the way, if you can't find these in your hobby shop, give me a call, I sell them. They're real expensive too. You better have your whole paycheck ready when you call it. Come on, go in there. We're over it. That's a nice tight fit. So now, even if it is too tight of a fit, rather than making it a sloppy fit, I just dress the edge off. There we go. Ooh. little trick is before I press these together, I put a drop of CA on them. Because what happens if you don't, they start to walk apart once they're inside the wheel pants, and it gets difficult to maintain a nice clearance. And after all the work we did getting these right, I don't want to have them, I don't want them doing this. I don't want them, if you don't have a bushing, relatively quickly these will start jamming in the wheel pan. And then I want to shim them so as they, in fact I'm going to take some of this rubber off, make the corners radius here and go over on a grindstone a little bit. But I want a nice, clean, nice tight fit. The things you can do is just put the wheels basically on a little screwdriver. This is an Allen wrench, and just take the little bit of the corner on each needless to say, don't run your hand into the sandpaper either. Use a grindstone. Now, of course, we also have a pair of grass gear with probably 2 1/4 inch wheels, but it just slims them out just a little bit. Again, get a little bit nicer fit in the wheel pants, a little clearance just in case some grass or some dirt or whatever gets up in there. Just going to pick this up later tomorrow. Time for supper. And today I want to check that all the controls nice and free. Don't have any binding at all in there. The WD-40 is soaked in overnight. I want to do the rest of this, well, some more of the assembly. Maybe get this finished today. Under this little guy, had we put this cover on earlier, we'd never get in here and buff this out. So this little cover, I'm going to mix up some more yellow epoxy. I want to see how close I can get that. Oh yeah, that's nice. Well, I'll do the same old trick. I'll mix up some yellow epoxy, just in case any oozes out, you'll hardly even see it. Now, of course, the only purpose of the yellow dye in there is if some of this happens to show. You know, Ski Dombrowski, when he made the epoxylite for his canopy on the lace maker, put some black dye in the epoxylite so that any went inside the canopy didn't really show. Kind of a neat idea. In fact, that's where I got the idea for this dye. Just make sure I have clearance around there. Another tip, while I have a little bit of yellow epoxy, what I did, I put a coat of yellow dope on here. Well, if I take a real fine paintbrush now and paint a coat of that epoxy on it, it'll have a nice glossy finish that'll keep it, hopefully, from getting oil soaked forever. A little bit extra, I'll just leave a nice little bead, just like making the switches on the dashboard switches on a Seafire. All these little detail touches, I know people think, you don't have to do that, it's a waste of time. Well, this is my thing, I like doing this. And of course, any that gets on a push rug, we'll obviously get off of there. But the main purpose is to make this totally fuel-proof. The thing this is really good for, before it kicks off, there's some little spots I just need to touch up. The little yellow epoxy makes a nice little filler. Any little spot that, in fact, there's one right here. clean a paintbrush with acetone when as soon as you're done. Ah, President Cardinal calling. Just in time for the epoxy to get... Now, as the epoxy's kicking off, I'm pressing it down to try to get a good seal. I'd obviously like to keep any oil out of there. It also makes the plane a little more aerodynamic, I think. Yeah, this might be the best lesson out of this whole program. If you decide to make wheel pants this way, be sure to cover these things up with tape. Boy, my hand is still throbbing away from this. I was amazed to read Bob Zambelli's the safety columnist. He cuts his finger twice in 2 days. Well, Bob, welcome to the club. Good thing he doesn't work in a dynamite factory. Anyway, I should have put these on as soon as I made it. Anyway, I want to fit up the wheel pants here. That's the next step. Now, with those little bushings on, I'm trying to make sure I don't have a lot of side play in the wheels. They're just free enough. I'm sure they'll rear in after a couple of nice landings and a couple of takeoffs, but they really have no side play at all. Put nice little brass screws in here, number 2s that I got from Micro Fasteners. That's ready to go. Now I want to start at the firewall and work my way up, get the tank brackets made, get a rough idea so I have that Brodeck variable tank mount. The one thing I just love the profile of this plane, like from the flying angle. Should be a nice little plane. Starting to really get excited about getting a flight on this. Now, I've never used these tank brackets before. They give you 4 in a pack here, it looks like. What's his number? BH777. There's 2 pairs in a box, which is handy. Obviously made for profile. Now, because we've never run this motor before, we don't really know if the tank should be higher off center or lower off center. Also, one of the things I've learned over the years, and this is important, this is the best tubing, the pink tubing. This is the stuff that I've been using, and I think almost every pro stunt flyer uses the best. Now, that little thing from Brodeck suggests 5/16 higher than centerline, so we're going to kind of lay this out. First, I'm going to solder those little brackets on. Get an idea, and I'll measure it out. A little more than a 1/4 inch higher. I would assume it'll never go lower, but it possibly could go higher. That's the typical thing as always with profile mounts, is it goes a little bit higher than center. Now what I'm doing, I'm just deburring. I don't want to have any little razor edges on this. And kind of radiusing off the corners a little bit. Obviously, this is just so when you wipe the plane off, you don't wind up catching a rag or something on that. These are nice heavy-duty brass, by the way. A nice little item. Without John Brodeck's commitment, there'd be a lot of these little goodies you just wouldn't have. Now, let me tell you something. If you think making these yourself is easy, go make a set and put that slot in there. Not as easy as it looks. Now, soldering these little tabs on can be a little tricky. I like to use Stay Bright. The reason being it melts at such a low temperature, you don't disturb all the other tank joints. But what I like to do is tin the piece where it's going to go. And I'm going to mount these off center only because on this plane, that's where I want to have them. Every installation would be a little different. I want these to favor this side. That sulfuric acid really bubbles up there. But the idea is to get the solder between the tank joint, not to solder around the perimeter like a picture frame. And because this is a small soldering iron, this part takes a little longer than normally if you have the heavy-duty gun. I like working with the little gun a little bit better, but I like to tin that whole area. Plenty of flux, plenty of tin. And a lot of people, when they were over here, I've seen before that they've had trouble with these breaking off because they didn't solder them on properly. And you want to get, my feeling would be you want to get as close to the end of the tank as possible. That's where you pick up a little bit of a rib. In here, it's just thin tin you're soldering onto. But you really want to get this. This is heating the whole area. Putting on a nice coat of just soft solder here. Now you notice it's going to be hot at this point in time. I want to get it roughly. Now it's not touching the tank because I've got those blobs of solder on there. Now what I'm trying to do is heat the copper, just like when you, I don't know if you can see this, just like when you do a plumbing joint. There it goes. If you look back here, you can see the solder has made a nice joint, nice ridge. I'll take this over to the sink and clean it up. Obviously, deflux it. Baking soda and water, number one. Then we can polish it up with some Brillo, get it cleaned up just a little bit. See, I have them a little off center because I have a feeling this is going to go a little higher on the fuselage. And I know it's not going to go lower. Well, we'll see what I know when we go flying. And of course, I'm going to be testing a lot of different tanks. I'd like to test bigger tanks, thin tanks, wide tanks, plastic tanks with this engine to try to come up with some real nice combinations and props, whatever, glow plugs. We'll be doing a lot of testing this summer on this plane. It'll be a great test bed. And it'll be a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun right now. I mixed up a little bit of soapy water, put some tubing on. I found out I got a little pinhole, which is not unusual. This is why you want to just put the minimum amount of heat on here. You don't want to heat the whole tank or the whole thing disassembles. Just the minimum heat right in the middle of the copper. Most of the heat should be on the copper because the solder will run to the copper. Now in this case I did put a little too much. There's a little air bubble right there coming out when I put this in the sink. So what I'll do is just get the silver solder and just try to fill that joint in. Anytime you work on a tank, you always loosen up the solder and the flux and whatever's inside the tank too. So even after I seal that seam, I want to put the tank completely underwater and put some air pressure onto it. Okay, that looks good. Now, I've already cleaned it with the baking soda. Now I want to I'll cap this off. I want to clean this up real good with some Brillo, just for appearance sake, and just to get these any other little rough spot that's still on there. Now I also want to clean the inside out. The best way, if you're really in doubt, is to use lacquer thinners first. Flush out the lacquer thinners. And in this case, I want to put a little bit of fuel in here first. I have to get my lacquer thinner can out. There we go. Get some idea of what's coming out of here. If all of a sudden, you know, dead mice are coming out of here, we're in trouble. Now, this looks pretty good. And of course, when the plane is in storage, you always want to leave some fuel in the tank, that's for sure. Put the little caps on for now. While I'm cleaning it. That fuel can just sit in there. Now I'll let that sit in there for an hour or so. Then I'll flush it out with lacquer thinners and then put a little more fuel in and run the fuel, pump the fuel through and out the pickup tube so that you can look in a coffee filter and see what's coming out. If a tank, no matter how clean a tank is, a new tank is always a nuisance. And on a new tank, you should always have some kind of a fuel filter just to keep from getting a lean run on the engine. And always leave fuel in the tank when it's being stored. Now in the next season, we're going to be spending quite a bit of time trying to get the K&B 40 to perform the way we hope, you know, at a contest level. It's a nice engine. the people I've already seen that have them, Robert Sabatino and some of the other people in the club, seem to have exceptionally good luck with them. But we like to, if we can possibly, take it to the next level where we're getting contest expert quality runs. And in doing that, one of the most important things is the tank size. Now, whoa, there we go. What I want to know, see I'm heating this up and the cap's blowing off. What I want to know is where the tank is going to ultimately wind up being shimmed. I want to try some different head shapes. I'll ask John Brodak to send me a couple of extra heads. I can make a Hemi head, etc. Like some head gaskets too, John, if you get a chance. Some Venturis. And I'll try to come up with the best possible combination I can. And of course, the nice thing is I can write about it and pass it on to you, save you all the work of having to do all this on your own, and hopefully anytime you need that information and it's available, just call me up. Now the last step here, I'm going to run maybe 3 or 4 tankfuls through. Now I'm going out on a paper towel because I can see real clearly what's coming out of here, if anything. It doesn't matter who makes the tank or even if you make your own. Cleaning it is always so important. And you just, any time you spend now, obviously what the advantage is you save all that time later on. And you save a lean run on a motor or whatever. Alcohol first, then fuel. That looks pretty decent now. Usually happens is after you run a tank 8-10 times, you clean the filter 5 times, whatever. But there's always some stuff that loosens up from the soldering job. There's just no practical way you can eliminate that. And cleaning a new tank is always critical. Before I mount the tank is these edges of the tubing are usually, if you just drag a nail file this way over them, this way the dust doesn't fall inside. There's always a little bit of a razor blade on it, and when that puts a little sharp edge in the tubing, especially being one of the things that we want to do is be able to have the option of running this on muffler pressure. Just run it over, run it over the corner. You can tell I don't rehearse this stuff, right? This should be our test tank now. This should be ready to go. Also, if a tank is inside a fuselage, what I like to do is take some I'll do it anyway, but even if it's not a fuselage. In the last little bit where the tubing goes over, put some little scratches on it in this dimension, like little threads, so that the tubing tends to stay on. If you ever get a lean run or vibration or anything, that'll just be a little lifesaver for you. It's free, it doesn't cost anything. Okay, now we're ready to position this tank. And what I have from years gone by is a drill with a bunch of washers just hot stuffed in place to act as a dead stop, and I'm going to run this. I drilled some little pilot holes with a Dremel tool, not with a drill, because what will happen if you drill a hole? It's right out the other side. I want to drill a hole. I want to have it not come out the other side, so I want to use this, and as the washers bottom out, I know I've got just enough of a hole in there now to accept those little brass, I don't know what you call them, brass blind nuts. And even though this is a little bit tedious doing it this way, you don't run the risk of the drill coming out the other side of the fuselage as easily. Now I try to get these inserts in as clean as possible. Not always possible, but sometimes it is. I gotta back off. Now I've been fooling around with this, I'm not so sure these little blind nuts are going to be strong enough, but I've got enough room to put 2 more if this starts to shake and get loose. I don't want to put any more because obviously it's just extra weight if I don't need them. But I'll check this, and if it gets loose, I do have like an infinite amount of tank adjustment here. And we'll start exactly where John Brodak said, to 5/16 above the glow plug. Now what I've been doing, I don't know if I can get this on the tape, I've been trying to lay the ruler in the head fins to use as a reference point to make sure I have that tank. I think you can get an idea here. It's 5/16 if I measure correctly. That's a good starting point. And of course I don't want to have the tank tilted up or down. So that's kind of I guess an easy way to cross-check it. Now the K&B needle has a little scratch in it. I like to take a Dremel parting wheel, just like on a Tiger, and put a much bigger scratch in there and put some paint or something. It's only because my eyes are so bad. I really want to be able to identify 1 or 2 clicks at a time. This looks like a nice rigid needle though, by the way. Now see, I like a little bigger scratch, and the white paint I think will help accent it, because again, if you have good eyes, it's great. You get to be 52, forget it. You wish you could have a thing a foot long up here. What I've been trying to do is figure out exactly where I want to put this pressure fitting. I don't want to have it on this side where it's snaking out. I guess I can get this on the inside, all the way to the back, and I'll have a nice clear path up to the uniflow line. Now, if you have a muffler pressure fitting and you don't use it, just cap it off or even leave it open. But if you don't have it and you want to use muffler pressure, now you're pretty well behind the 8 ball. Now, it looks like I'll just have to run a 632 tap drill and tap this guy out, and we'll be all set. That'll just about clean us up here.